Hey everyone, it's Desiree, and I am here with a very different video, and I know, I always say that one, but that is because this one truly is different. I am going to try something new. Now, we all watch Jennifer McGuire, and we are always in awe of what she creates, especially me. But recently, she did a video on bridge cards. So here is my attempt. I'm going to do 3 different cards. So the first one we're going to do is a landscape card. And what you're going to do is you're going to cut your cardstock 4 1/4 by 8 inches, and then you're going to score it on both ends at 1 1/4 and 2 1/2. Then you're going to flip it for the other side again to score it at 1 1/4 by 2 1/2. You then want to take your paper creaser, excuse me, and just firm up those score marks. You want to make sure that these are nice and crisp. And as you keep folding this card, they'll loosen up. And this is the shape that you'll get. So it's almost like a step or a platform. So you can see when the one side is folded and the other is extended, your front will equal 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. So I kept on playing with it. Yes. So I dug into my stash and I pulled out a couple of the past small and large dies of the month. Excuse me. This one's by Spellbinders, of course, and it's called Spring Flutter. And I thought this piece was perfect to go across those 2 panels on the side. Again, you're looking for something that is wide enough for that opening. Now, that opening, when you're doing a landscape, is really 2 1/2. Because, no, I'm sorry, it's 3 inches. I had to think about that. And how I got that, if I scored 1 1/4 on each end to start out with, and if I add that together, that's 2 1/2. If this going across is 5 1/2, then I'm going to add 3 inches to that. So that's the center piece of the bridge. So you need a piece that's long enough. So this die cut was perfect. Now I'm keeping this white. I used a sentiment from a Gina K stamp set that's called Wealth of Wishes, and I thought it just fit perfectly along the band in the front. I pulled out one of my embossing folders from my stash. This is by Stampin' Up, and it's called Falling Hearts, and I'm using a piece of gray cardstock. Now, this piece is automatically cut to be 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a piece from each side that measures 1 1/4. So, and then I'm going to move this to the other side because I want this to go through the 2 sides and, of course, in the back. I'm okay, and I actually like the fact that I used a white card base. So even though these panels are gray and the sides aren't gray, I really like it. Actually, in my opinion, I don't know, it actually added to the step effect that this bridge card is providing or allowing for. So once I have those cut, I'm going to use my liquid adhesive, and I'm using my art glitter glue, and I'm going to secure them down to each of the sides, making sure that it's covering that panel. Excuse me. And then I'm going to finally secure the center panel in there as well. I cut from both ends of that so that the hearts look like they're continuing through. It's one continuous piece. It's like if you used a piece of pattern paper, which you certainly could use, you would want to cut from each end because then the pattern will continue evenly as it goes across. So when it's sitting up, you don't see those panels until you fold it to the side. And that right there is that base. Okay, so very simple. You can decorate it as you want. So now I'm going to take my bridge piece. I'm going to adhere it. I'm going to flatten the card out. and I'm going to adhere it evenly on the one side, and then I'm just going to lay it down for the other side. I found by laying this flat, I was sure that I was going to get the correct movement of my card to go back and forth, which also will keep loosening it up. It'll start working better. I found if I tried to connect the one side and then just put the glue on the other side and matched up those ends there, sometimes I was a little off. So it sometimes created some issues. So for me, that was the basic mechanics of how to do this. So you want to first determine, okay, am I going to do a landscape or am I going to do a portrait? So again, our first one was a landscape. Now we're going to do a portrait. So now we're going to cut our cardstock 5 3/4 by 5 1/2, and we're going to score from both ends again. First at 3/4 and then at 1 1/2. We're going to flip our cardstock around like we did, and we're going to score that again. 3/4 and 1 1/2. Again, using our paper creaser to make sure we've got nice crisp folds. So your side panels when you're doing a portrait are definitely skinnier. Now for this one, I'm just going to use a white piece of cardstock. I'm going to use an embossing folder by Spellbinders, which is just going to add some texture. And I'm going to do the same thing that I did with the hearts. I'm going to emboss that, and then I'm going to cut 3/4 of an inch off of each side of the piece, of the panel. Again, that pattern will then be able to go across. Now, since I'm using white cardstock, those side panels, what I call the steps, aren't as prominent. But they are still there, because again, I've got sections of the cardstock that are textured, where the sides are smooth. So the same thing, I'm just determining which way I want my embossed design to go. Do I want the areas coming towards me to be on top or going down into the card? I'm then going to glue the other pieces in place, again using my art glitter glue again as well. Now for this one, I chose one of the past, and I'm sorry, the other die that I used is from February of 2019, and again, it's called Spring Flutter. Now, you may not have gotten this in your subscription, but if you're interested in that, they are available. At the time I did this video, these die sets are actually available for individual purchase, and I'll make sure that they're linked below. So that's what our card looks like. So for this one, I wanted to use, again, one of the past, except this time it's a large die of the month for February, and this is called Bonjour. And it has a beautiful, beautiful layered butterfly. So I'm going to take each of these layers. You can see I already have them die cut in shades of teals and blues, and I'm just going to glue the center in place so that each of these layers will actually fan out and just give a little bit of dimension off of the butterfly. So I'm just helping them to fan a little bit. Now this here, and I have another one of my strips. So I'm using a strip for my sentiment, and I'm going to choose another one from my Favorite Things Essential Sentiments, and it's called, and it states Sending You Strength. So I'm using one of those strips because that butterfly just fits across that opening. And again, that opening is just in the area of 3 inches. Matter of fact, it might be just a little bit less than that. But it's very close to it. So that butterfly, it's a nice size butterfly, but you'll see it's just the little tips of the top wing that's going to touch going across. So I'm getting my sentiment ready, and I did use my Altenew Obsidian Black ink for that. And I'm going to actually use that sentiment strip to help bridge this card together. So you can see that when this is just sitting normally, and you can see just the very tips, I'm putting glue on, only in those areas. I'm going to flatten my card again, bending one side in, bending the other side out, so you see that white step, that white side, and then I'm going to set my butterfly in place. And I'm just going to hold that there for a little bit, just to make sure that the glue adheres, because it is on a textured piece. Once I lift it, or put it back into its place, it's flimsy, and that's why I'm poking at it the way that I am. So by using the... Sorry, I was poking at it. So by using the sentiment and just bringing that up into the butterfly layers, just on the base layer, and have everything else coming above it, I'm able to add a little bit more strength in the bridge going across. So you kind of have that open look as well. That's another one of her videos that is my favorite, when she does those open front cards. Yes, I got to try that too. It's just, you know, these ideas, they are phenomenal, but they are intimidating. At least I think they are for me. So this is out of my comfort zone, but I'm having fun with it. So it's nice to try things, trying new techniques. What's great with this one is you can use what's in your stash. You can use your cardstock, and that's pretty much what this is. The mechanism is the card itself. So just by adding that strip, I've got a little bit more strength in my card. So something very two-tone, but I wanted to also play with that first die that I used. Again, that was from the small die of the month from February from Spellbinders, called Spring Flutter. And I used some of my Prisma alcohol markers to color it. So this time I added some color, just 2 colors. I'll have them listed below or on my blog. I'll have a card made up for my blog. So I took a piece of yellow cardstock. This is going to be another landscape. And I used a sun ray embossing folder, and it's by Desiree, and I believe it's called Sunray. So going to do the same thing. I made sure I cut from each of those ends to make sure the pattern goes across. I'm going to use my art glitter glue to set my panels in place. I do like to use liquid glue. I think I get a better adhesion when it comes to especially something like this, but it is also something that I do grab for on a regular basis. I'm going to set my center panel in place now, and then that will sit, of course, in the back. And again, this bright color, I'm seeing that white come from the sides, and I really do like that look. Again, to me, it just pulls in a step effect, which adds to the dimension of it. I don't know if that makes sense, but you know, for me, it did. Remember, your center section that you're creating your image over is 3 inches for the landscape. So I did the same thing. I put glue on the bottom. I laid it as if it's going to be in the envelope. So one side folds in, the other side goes the same direction, which would have it fold out. And I placed my focal point going across that. Now I'm going to create another strip. And you can see I have 2 pieces of acetate right by those 2 little butterflies that are individual. And they are from the same small die collection from February. So I'm going to stamp my sentiment. And the sentiment I chose was also from the Gina K. Wealth of Wishes, and it's called "You Are the Sunshine of My Life." So again, sunshine, yellow cardstock, rays. Yeah, it's what I do. It's what I do when it comes to my sentiments. So in her video, she also showed to create like a section behind so that you can have things that are fluttering or moving. Yes. So I'm giving that a shot as well. But first, I'm going to set my sentiment in place. And I did create that strip specifically because you could see as I was using my alcohol colors, I got it on the band. So I just want to make sure that, we're good. We're all set for that. So I just cut a strip. And what I want to make sure is that it's 3 inches wide. And just a little bit smaller than that. But I just want to make sure that that's what that gap is. And I'm going to trim the 2 tails because it was actually going to come right up almost to the back piece. So I'm going to place glue on those little tiny extensions there. And I'm going to pinch the one side in place. And then I'm just going to come across and pinch that as well. I'm not worried if that's bowing a little bit. I'm letting it go. That's my phrase. Let it go. Keep going. No one's going to see that. I did use yellow, and it is the same width as my sentiment. So it is kind of hidden behind that. But again, if it's seen a little bit, again, it's okay. I do say this a lot. Let it go. Keep going with your card and see what this is going to create. I'm going to use some liquid adhesive and I'm going to put the butterflies up on top of this acetate. Now I will be cutting these down. Again, wasn't quite sure how high I would want them, what area they were going to sit in when it came to this card. Now to give myself a little bit of quick stick, let's call it that. I am going to use some double-sided tape just to get me that quick, because sitting there and holding that with the liquid glue, I'd probably get a cramp and it would probably shift on me. I am adhering these to that yellow strip because I do want them to be back a little bit. Again, it's just offering a stronger 3D effect. And they do really wiggle. I'm sitting here playing with the card. Can you hear that? Yes. But just to give it, make it look like they're fluttering. Yeah. Okay. I did really have fun with these. I'm glad that I overcame. Again, I was intimidated by this, but to try this is a lot of fun. These were actually really fun to create. And what I really enjoyed was you can use what's in your stash. I'm sure we have pieces that are available. Do you have to use die cuts? No, use pieces of cardstock. Think about how cool it would be if you made one of these and you had strips of cardstock going across this. Or if you created... if you wove the cardstock strips together and then put them across that bridge. There's just so many things that you can do. And you can see there my butterflies, they're having fun. They're wiggling. It looks like they're fluttering. Okay, to me it looks like they're fluttering. But I had a really nice time. I did not put the back flap on the back of these cards. I figured, I could just write my note right on the back there. And if they would want that covered up, they can certainly put something there if they wanted to, or just put it somewhere where somebody wouldn't see the back. So again, we're going to do another portrait. So again, we're cutting 5 3/4 by 5.5 inches tall. Along the 5 3/4, we're going to score 3/4 and 1.5 on each side. And we're going to use our paper creaser to make sure that we've got nice creases. For this one, I'm going to cut, I'm going to cut some cardstock here. I was thinking about pink, and again, I changed my mind. I'm going with a piece of Desert Storm, and I pulled out one of my embossing folders by Desiree called Polka Dot. How convenient is that? Now, for this one, we are actually... I had a lot of fun with this one. So again, I'm going to cut off those two side panels at 3/4 of an inch wide, not 3 3/4, 3/4 of an inch wide. And then I'm going to adhere them to the inside. Now, for the inside of the portrait, that is approximately 2 3/4 wide there. So I'm going to adhere those pieces. Now, the die set that I used for this, again, it is one of the past kits. Now, this one was actually from July 2018, and it back then it was just called, Die of the Month for July. Again, I'll have it linked below, but it's got some beautiful flowers that die cut and emboss, and you have the outline, and then it had some greenery that went with it as well. So I did cut a bunch of these flowers, and of course I did that off camera. So you can see with those polka dots, it just gives a nice texture. Now again, you can use pattern paper, you can use your embossing folders, you can use, if you have dies, you can use that as well. I'm pulling out some acetate again, and I'm just going to cut some strips. So when it comes to these strips, so I'm going to kind of sort of combine, you can see me thinking here, kind of sort of combine that open card look that we have going on. So when I did this, yeah, this is lots of letting go was going on here. So one of the things I found that, yes, you can use liquid adhesive to adhere your acetate. Problem is, it takes forever to dry. So my impatience came in like there was no tomorrow. So I grabbed a glue dot. Glue dots are instant, and they are absolutely wonderful because lots of adhesion going on there. And it's immediate. So I'm going to place one of those in place, and I'm going to straddle these across the front of my card. I'm looking for these to somewhat be a backing. So I'm going to trim these just a little bit because, again, I kind of know I want them to join on that side. And they're going to, all of these flowers that I've die cut and layered, these are double layers when it comes to the die cuts. So now what I'm going to, and I just chose two colors, a nice peach, a darker coral, and a nice maroon. So now I'm just going to use the glue dots, and I'm going to place this greenery going around the card. For that, I will use my liquid adhesive just to make sure that they're going to stay in place. So I want the greenery to actually come out and around the flower. So the first one is set. So I'm combining that open card front, but I did want them to sit on something. I didn't want to just connect the flowers and not have anything behind them, if that made sense. With the acetate being there and building this line of flowers coming across, again, it helped to give it some stability in the placement of where I wanted to go with these flowers. So use the acetate in case you saw it, in case it was visible, you'd see right through it. But at the same time, again, giving it that stability, because as I'm adhering the flowers with the glue dots, it's pulling in those acetates to connect together. I hope all of that made sense. Lots of gabbing going on here. And yes, this is a long video, so apologize for that. If you stuck in this long, thank you. But I did want you to see the full process. If you notice, I really didn't speed up this video too much because, you know, there's a lot to see in this. And again, it's not that I have any tips or tricks. Maybe there is something that I did a little bit differently that you can also try, but I definitely will link to her video below. I was completely inspired by this technique, and I just had to try it. And there was a couple people that, there's a group I have who challenged me on this as well, so gotta take the challenge. Have to do it. But again, it's when you're learning a new technique, you got to go with it. You've got to make sure that, you know, give it a try. Is it going to be perfect? Absolutely not. But that's a handmade card. There is lots of errors going on in this. And again, I did very little editing. The only thing I really did on these was to speed it up just a little bit. So that it wasn't, you know, an hour and a half long, you know, video almost. But you can see that just those 3 flowers there's your base. And then these next 3, I think I just used 2 actually. They're going to kind of bridge those 3 flowers together. So it's kind of a bridge on top of a bridge, just to give it more stability. And to provide that solidness that goes across. I didn't need to add a sentiment strip going across like I did with the butterfly because there was so much going across on this bridge. I am going to ink around the edges of these smaller flowers just a little bit more than I did with the larger. It'll actually give another tone of color to those flowers. So once again, we're going to play around with that placement and get those secured in place. Now, since I'm going on the cardstock, I'll be able just to use my liquid adhesive. And that is our panel. You can see that it's grabbing onto the acetate. I would probably have used a few more glue dots, to be very honest, when it came to those strips. While liquid glue will hold, it does have a very easy chance to just slide apart and pull apart because there's nothing for the glue to grab onto. It's, you know, you've got these 2 pieces of acetate, you've got that glue, it's plastic, 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 and it's just going to pop off of each other. So that's the one thing that I would do differently. And I would definitely, and I do this, you can see those 2 flowers. There we go. We're just going to put a little bit of squirt glue there. And then again, that helps with that bridge as well. It doesn't have a weak spot. And that's what I was really looking for, are the weak points when it came to this one. Just to make sure they had a little bit of strength. The sentiment I chose is from My Favorite Things, Essential Sentiments again, and I chose Love You More. I'm just going to trim that down after I heat set that using my Brutus Monroe Alabaster White Fine Detail Embossing Powder. And I'm just going to look to where I want to place this sentiment. I decided to come up into the focal point because it will stand out because of the white embossing powder. So to make sure that I can get that pushed down, I am going to come in with my paper creaser. Now I could have just folded it down. And again, that's how that's going to go back and forth. And because I laid it flat when I glued down the stripes, I have a better shot of that working better mechanically. And what I mean, just folding it back and forth so it will fit in the envelope better. I'm going to grab my sequins. And these are my iridescent sequins. I'm just going to put a bunch of dots down. And I'm just going to go to town to make those sequins the center of my flowers. Excuse me. So I'm just going to keep my hand underneath that while I use my wax pencil to lift up my sequins and place them down onto the flower. So I am creating layers. So you do want to make sure you have a little bit more glue. And of course the one sequin is driving me crazy because it wants to stick to my finger and not the cardstock. Yes. Yes. So by filling that in, I'm adding more texture to my flowers. I'm adding a little bit of sparkle. Now you could have just used your sparkle pen if you wanted to. You don't have to use the sequins that I'm still fighting with on the first one, because that's what I did. And now I'm just going to come in and fill in the rest of the flowers. Again, since I'm creating actually steps and layers with the sequins, you do want to make sure that you put a little bit more glue when you get to that final layer, just so that you can have a touching point between your cardstock and your sequin. So I'm making a little bit of a bigger dot there, and then the sequin just goes right down into that and settles just fine. And then I'm just going to place the last one right on that smaller flower that's still up there. I'm just having fun layering the sequins. I love these sequins. They're my favorite. They're my staple. Iridescent. And as you can see, the sequins are still sticking on me. I used a lot of glue. Again, you gotta let it go. By this time, I was determined to get this card completed and to get all of them done. As I said, this was a lot of fun to try. Again, first time for me to make a bridge card. Knew they were out there, but never did that before. So I was really glad that I got myself to try this. So I encourage you, dig into those stashes. You've got stuff to make these. All the products that I use will be linked down below. All right. Now go to my blog, because on my blog I'll have a color card for the alcohol markers that I use to color my piece. I'll also have the sizes and the score marks identified on my blog as well, so that you will be able to mark those down also. And if you have any questions or comments, please leave those down below. But know that I will link to Jennifer's video that she did. She was the inspiration for this. So I say thank you for that. But to you all, thank you so much for stopping by and spending this little time to watch my video. If you haven't already, I'd love for you to subscribe. Make sure you ring the bell, because there's all kinds of different videos coming out and paper products. I hope everyone's having a great day. I hope you're enjoying the weather wherever you are. Take care, but always remember what's most important. Always be creative.